Thank you, Connor, for that report. I'd like to continue on this conversation by bringing onto the program now political analyst Brian Sobel. Brian, good to see you. There's so much to talk about, I feel, but let's kind of start with the main point that Connor had in that latest reporter package, which is this entire issue of reproductive rights. So, as you heard, Harris, she's going to embark on a wide tour there, focusing on that. And then the former president earlier this week changing his stance when it comes to IVF treatments. I'd like to get your thoughts on kind of how these two candidates are handling this very delicate issue and how you think that may impact Trump going into November now that he's kind of voiced more of a moderate opinion with reproductive rights.
So you used the word delicate. It is. These candidates are really trying to thread a needle here. From the Harris-Walz side, they are going hard at the woman vote, the women in America, and how they may feel about reproductive rights, and hence the 50-city reproductive tour. For Donald Trump, he is also trying to thread the needle as to where he comes down on abortion. He's clear that he wants the states to make the decision about that. But that is consistent with his feeling about a lot of things, that the education, other things need to be returned to the states so states can make their own decisions about things. It's a philosophical difference with Democrats. Democrats generally want federal government to be, overseeing everything, and a lot of Republicans want things returned to the states so that individual states may make a decision.
Speaking a little bit more about how both of these candidates have handled different policy issues this week, it wasn't just Trump that we saw kind of change his stance on reproductive rights, but we also saw the Vice President Kamala Harris. She participated in her first sit down interview with CNN. And it's really been highlighted what she's been talking about with fracking, for instance, the Green New Deal, kind of how she's also more toward the middle on that, saying she will not ban fracking. So, how do you think that that is going to be perceived by voters to see both of these candidates not being so stark heading into the November elections? And also, what does that say about the political climate in this day and age?
It's not unusual, certainly in a lead up to a presidential election, to have the candidates moderate their points of view. They do it because they have to pick off independents and the moderates in the other party. And so you're seeing Kamala Harris do that. You saw her the other night really moderate her views on things like, as you point out, fracking and the border, and trying to really, in a sense, rewrite her history and trying to run away from, frankly, the Biden Harris 3.5 years in public office. The obvious question is, and what it was asked but not entirely answered, is, well, you've been there for 3.5 years. What has your administration done? And her answer was, well, it's a decade-old problem. So, again, it's essentially it preceded our administration. And so also true with Donald Trump, where he thinks he can pick off moderate Democrats and independents. He's moving to the middle as well, because he's got some views that Democrats just can't align with at all, and even moderate Democrats can't align with. So this is typical at this stage of a campaign, a presidential campaign, to see people come to the middle. Once they're elected, they again swing back out to their natural proclivity.
I want to go back to something that you said within this last answer, which is that Harris really has tried to pitch this new way forward, trying to separate herself from the Biden administration because she does face a lot of those questions on, why didn't you do certain things when you've been there in the White House. But next week, Biden is supposed to campaign with Harris in Pennsylvania. What are your thoughts on that strategy within her campaign? Why would they try to do that?
I think it's because they believe Biden polls well and is well received by a lot of people in Pennsylvania. I thought in the interview on CNN that Harris did try a couple of times and it succeeded in giving President Biden his due as a 50-year servant of the American people. And everything at this stage is done because you've polled on it, because you know how people are feeling, not just nationwide, but in states and by precincts. The amount of data that I see and that other people see is extraordinary. So they know that bringing Joe Biden in to campaign in Pennsylvania and maybe other places is a win for them. He doesn't play well in other states, but because they know what their polling looks like in Pennsylvania, they're happy to bring him in, especially in Philadelphia and other places.
Let's look back to this week and compare a little bit about how where both the Trump and Harris campaigns, kind of the strategies that they were taken. So we talked about Harris sitting down for that first interview with CNN. She didn't do it alone, though. She was with her running mate pick, Tim Walz. Meanwhile, we've seen that Trump and Vance have kind of gone separate ways and try to hit different areas with their rallies individually. So why do each of these sides think that those are the best approaches to appeal to voters?
Yeah, I think in the case of Harris and Walz, I think they still feel a need to continue introducing themselves, both of them, to voters. Trump is a known entity. Harris is a known entity, but Trump is known as a former president. So he doesn't have to reintroduce himself to the American people. Harris, on the other hand, has no record to really look at on a national level. And people knew she was the vice president, but didn't know much more than that. And frankly, when she was assigned certain things like the border, she disappeared. And same with Tim Walz, Minnesota governor. Outside of Minnesota and the states around Minnesota, you didn't know anything about him. J.D. Vance does need to introduce himself to a lot of people. Only been in the Senate a couple of years, and so he's out there. And it's just a campaign decision that we can cover more ground by going in separate directions. That's in the case of Trump, Vance, and in the case of Harris Walz, we need to really, really solidify people around our ticket. And so I would guess that is the strategy within each camp.
So, Brian, just one final question for you today. The race does seem to remain pretty tight. Both of those polls kind of showing an equal matchup here. What do you think it's going to take for each of these candidates to take the lead within these next few weeks?
Well, first, this was predictable. I predicted it, but no genius. But I've been watching politics for a lot of years and reporting on it for a lot of years. And if you look at what happens after conventions, it's pretty standard. The convention is concluded. The candidate that comes out of the convention receives a bump, and in this case, Kamala Harris received a predictable bump and made up a lot of ground that they were behind. Democrats were behind by 4 or 5 points, and then jumped ahead by 2. So my prediction was 5 to 7 points. It's right on, and but then I've said, now it's game on. Now they're out there having to start doing interviews and other things, and you're going to see this race continue to remain tight up until Election Day. And don't forget, there's early voting starting in September, right around the corner, obviously, and so more and more information is going to come out. I don't know that we're going to see one candidate say sprint out ahead by 3, 4, 5 points. I don't see that, but I think for the American people, whichever way this goes, 3, 4, 5% may quell any idea that there's hijinks, shenanigans going on in the voting returns.
Brian, I think you said it best there. It is game on right now as we head into these November elections. Always appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox. Brian Sobel, political analyst. Take care. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Of course, you as well. We're going to step away for another quick commercial break here at Live Now from Fox. Stick with us, though. We'll be back.